hum and tick of clocks surrounded Horace ever since he was born, mostly because his parents were the local clockmakers. But that wasn't the only reason. As a matter of fact, Horace and his family, known to the whole town but not discussed by any of them, were all Clockwork soul sorcerers. His parents spent most of their time making pocket watches and small trinkets and selling them to the townsfolk. But Horace wanted more out of his life. He remembered his dad telling him this story of gem of some kind that could power a clock forever. Horace wanted to find it, wanted to leave his town, wanted to adventure. I'm Trevor, and I post D&D videos every Wednesday. In this video, I'm going to create a level 1 sorcerer, and I'm actually also going to level them up. This is the third video in a How to Play D&D series that I've been running on this channel. In the previous video, I went over how spellcasting and spell slots work, and like I said, in this one, I want to create a spellcaster, specifically Horace, like I mentioned before, a sorcerer. And then I'm going to create them at level 1, but level them up to level 2 and level 3 to show you how that process works. In some cases, it's very straightforward. Sometimes you only have to roll HP or add a couple of spells. And in other cases, it can get a little complicated. But because it happens piece by piece, it's never too much, and it's always one of the most fun things about D&D. The first thing we're going to do is generate the stats. I'm going to roll those on screen so we can see them, and you guys can keep me honest. Then I'll make the character sheet, and I'll come back and talk about Horace at level 1. This is the same website I used in our tutorial in the first video in this series. So I'm going to use it again. I'm going to generate a new character, and those are the stats that I'll be using for Horace. All right, there we go. So these are the base stats that I'm going to start with. Horace is going to start as a level 1 tiefling sorcerer, and then I'll level him up from there. So this is Horace at level 1. I'm going to do a quick walkthrough of his character sheet. He is a level 1 sorcerer, and the background I chose is Guild Artisan. It doesn't work perfectly, but it works well enough. The Guild Artisan background gives him proficiency in insight and persuasion. Think about it like bartering and reading people, things that would be useful for salesmen and craftsmen. It also gives him the membership to the Clockmakers Guild. That's kind of how I'm flavoring his family's selling of clocks and pocket watches. It gives him both proficiency in and access to Tinker's tools, a set of traveling clothes, and a letter that signifies that he belongs in this particular guild. It also gives him one additional language, in which case I picked Gnomish, and that seemed like it fit for tinkering, right? I would assume that Horace's family maybe interacts with gnomes when they're talking about plans for making different kinds of clocks and things like that. That is typical fantasy. That's the basic stuff. Now, what's probably on a lot of your minds is the roles that I ended up with for this character. If you notice, I ended up with a 4, which is almost the lowest roll you can get. But I decided to do this actually changed my idea for Horace just slightly. I put the 4 in strength, and you can see the other stats here. 13 in dexterity, 12 in constitution. This was a 13 in intelligence, but because of being a tiefling, it went up to 14, 8 in wisdom, and a 13 in charisma, but tieflings get +2 to their charisma, so that went up to 15. And that laid out all like this, and I was really trying to rack my brain over, how do I play this, right? Why does he have such a low strength? And then it hit me. In my head originally, Horace was going to be about an adolescent, or the equivalent to a human adolescent. But now, Horace is the equivalent to a human 4 or 6-year-old. He ran away from home. And I kind of tied that into his flaw. He heard these stories from his father, and he wants to find this gem that can power clocks forever, but he just grabbed some kitchen knives, which is why he has 3 daggers, and took off out the front door while his parents were asleep, and wants this sense of adventure in this quest. So he's a little bit dexterous, a little bit charismatic, but he's weak as a sack of potatoes because he's a child, right? Like, he's a kid. I don't know exactly how tieflings age, and I don't expect anyone to look that up. Normally when I'm talking to my table about it as a DM, I normally use human age as a reference point. At level 1, we have a proficiency bonus of 2. Horace can't wear armor because he's a sorcerer, so his armor class is 11, 10 plus his dexterity. His initiative is the same, 10 plus is 30, and his speed is 30 feet from being a tiefling. His maximum hit points are 7 because you take your maximum hit die and you add your constitution modifier. He has 1d6 hit die. I added the most common cantrip that he's going to use right here, which is Ray of Frost, based on his charisma, the damage, and then it has a small speed debuff if it hits. It's okay with the DM. I might even see if I could flavor that. Maybe less like ice and more like time, like sapping the time out of someone, and that's why they're slowing down. If the DM doesn't like that flavor, then we don't have to do it that way. But I've always thought that that was a cool way to show the effects of like magical time manipulation without it getting wildly overpowered. Because he's a tiefling, he gets dark vision and resistance to fire, and then we get some of his specifically Clockwork Soul features. So he gets manifestations of order. Whenever he casts a sorcerer spell, he and the person affected by the spell can hear the ticking of clockwork. I just think that's so flavorful and so cool. It's so minor, but I think it would make role-playing Horus a lot more fun. He also gets Restore Balance. Now, he can use this a proficiency bonus number of times, so at this level he can use it twice. It recharges on a long rest. And what he can do is, when he sees a creature within 60 feet of him that would make an attack, or any kind of roll, with advantage or disadvantage, he can prevent that advantage or disadvantage from being applied. So this ties back to this clockwork concept of balance and order among all things. And it's doing that by removing advantage and disadvantage, by balancing things out. It's a really fascinating ability. It's super cool, super flavorful. We can now look at, well, he also has his arcane focus, which is his pocket watch that he grabbed on his way out. Now we can see the spells that I chose for Horus. His spellcasting ability is Charisma, his spell save DC is 12, and his spell attack bonus, which is Charisma plus proficiency, comes out to 4. For cantrips, he gets Thaumaturgy just from being a tiefling, and then the 4 that I picked for being a sorcerer are Ray of Frost, Mending, Mage Hand, and Message. I didn't mean to just pick M cantrips, that was happenstance. Like I said, if I could, with the DM, I'd reflavor Ray of Frost a little bit, and then Mending, Mage Hand, and Message all seem like useful kind of roleplay elements. Obviously, Mending could work in terms of helping out around the factory and repairing these clockwork objects. Message to tell his parents things. It just seems like all very practical, applicable, and roleplay specific, or like character specific cantrips. And then for level 1 spells, he gets Alarm and Protection from Good and Evil for being a Clockwork Soul Sorcerer. And then the spells that I chose are Shield and Magic Missile. These just seem like very run-of-the-mill, kind of intro to magic sort of spells that he might have kind of been naturally imbued with, or it just seems like fun, basic stuff that a little kid, even a little kid sorcerer, might know how to do. Now I'm going to level Horus up to level 2. And then I'll come back and we'll see what's changed about his character sheet from level 1 to level 2. So now I've done almost everything for leveling Horus up to level 2, with the exception of hit points. So he also has a name now, because I forgot to include that before. He's going to go to 2d6 hit die. We could take the average, which would be a 4, or we could roll it. And given how well rolling his stats went, we're going to roll a d6 and see what we get. A 1. That couldn't have gone better. So for Horus's character, we're going to take this 1 that we rolled for HP. Now, be aware, on my actual table, if somebody rolls a 1 when they're rolling HP, I always let them re-roll. But I think it's kind of funny how this character is coming out. So we're going to let this stand, and Horus is going to gain 1 plus his Constitution, which is 1. He's going to gain a whopping 2 HP. So his max hit points are going to be 9. It makes sense. He's a young kid. He's growing, but he's still a small child who ran away from home. At this level, what Horus gained were a couple of different features, primarily from his sorcerer class. So at this level, he gained sorcery points. He now has 2 sorcery points that he can use, and he can use them for flexible casting. With this feature, he can, as a bonus action, expend these sorcery points to turn them into spell slots, or expend the spell slots and turn them into sorcery points. Sorcery points get a lot more useful as you level up. At this level, they're pretty limited in what you can do. He also got 1 more first level spell. So if we scroll down to that page, he now has the spell Catapult. Now I'm going to level Horus up to level 3, and that'll be where I wrap up the video. So this is Horus now at level 3. I want to point out that I did make one mistake for the character sheet for level 2. I forgot to change the slot total. So we should have, at level 2, that should have said 3. In the description down below, I have the character sheets for Horus at level 1, level 2, and this one at level 3, and all the information will definitely be correct there. So let's look over Horus at level 3. There's just one thing we have left to do. I didn't roll for HP again, so I'm going to do that right now. So we're going to change this to 3. Now it's 3d6 hit die, and we're going to see what Horus rolls for his HP. I could not. I swear, I didn't redo this clip. Like, this is all just happening. I don't know how this is happening, but Horus gets another 2 HP, so he's at 11 maximum HP. I don't know how fun this character would be to play, per se, but I think the flavor, like the idea of him, is hilarious to me. If I wasn't a forever DM, I would love to try to play this like spunky kid who runs away from a home and has basically no HP and could get killed by a stiff breeze. So at level 3, Horus gets a couple of things. Level 3 is a pretty big, or it's one of the bigger transitions, level 5 being probably the biggest like turning point. At level 3, Horus gets second level spells, and we'll get to that in just a second. He gets meta magic. So this is another way that he can use his sorcery points. The meta magic that I picked for him were extended spell and quicken spell. Extended spells can make spells with a duration last longer, and quicken spell can make spells that normally take an action to cast cost a bonus action to cast. Both of these seem to me like temporal manipulation style things. So now he does have more options for his sorcery points. He now has 3 sorcery points because he's 3rd level. And it's not just using those points to turn them into spell slots or breaking down spell slots to turn them into. Now he has more options because he can use these meta magics for his sorcery points or with his sorcery points. Other than that, the other thing that he got was 2nd level spells, like I mentioned. So now if we look, not only are the slot totals correct for 1st level, he also has 2 2nd level spells. In total, he has 4 spells known. That's why I did this dividing line right here, because the spells that he has known are Shield, Magic Missile, Catapult, and Shatter. It was between Shatter and Hold Person for the new spell that he got at this level. And I decided to go with Shatter because I imagine this big like clockwork sound that rings out. And it just seemed kind of flavorful and cool. But I think Hold Person could also work, obviously, because it could be flavored as paralysis, but it could also be flavored as being stuck or trapped in time. I know I'm leaning into the flavor part of all of this, but that's why I play D&D, right? Like, that's coming up with these unique character concepts and running with them is the most fun that I can have. Aid and Lesser Restoration, much like Alarm and Protection from Good and Evil before, come from being a Clockwork Soul Sorcerer and don't count against the spells known. It's one of the benefits that Tosh has really added to some of these subclasses. They really let you get more flexible and give you more options, which was an original complaint with the Sorcerer as written in the Player's Handbook. So this is Horus. Like I said, I'm going to have the character sheets for levels 1, 2, and 3 in the description of this video. And if you want to try to play a character with a strength of 4 who is a small child that ran away from home, please feel free. They would make my day. I love this character concept, and I hope that this process made the daunting task of making a spellcaster a little bit easier. I will say one other tip that I have is you can look, I'm sure they exist on the iOS store, and I know that they do on Android because that's what myself and my table tend to use. You can look for apps that have spell books in them where you can create spell books for your characters. They also have, like, you can print them out too. I know some people make pretty creative ones with like binders and things like that. But just having a way to keep your spells organized is one of the things that makes playing a spellcaster a lot more convenient. Now, if you're playing in a computer, it's really easy to just pull up a copy of the Player's Handbook or Google it, and you can find most of the spells online. And then it's not too much of an issue. But if you are playing at a table, I would recommend having a backup or a spell book or an app of some kind. I think it does help. I DM with my laptop open because I'm using it to run the game, but I'm also using it to look up how specific things work and stuff like that. So I hope this rundown for how to create a spellcaster and how to level up a character was useful. And as always, be safe. Make smart life choices.